Welcome to the Make Space for Growth podcast. My name is Sara Vicente Barreto, and I'm your host. I'm a corporate strategist, problem solver, social entrepreneur, writer, mom of two, and passionate for growth, at home, in business, or in my community. This is season 2 of the Make Space for Growth podcast, a moment of lift. After what will always be reminded as the coronavirus year, 2021 has presented us with many challenges, but also a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. Our journey continues, strengthened by what we leave behind, hopeful for what lies ahead. From a good, bad, or so-so 18 months, we rise to the challenge. We lift our souls to believe. We lift our minds from the fear. We lift our lives from the dark times that we leave behind. This is our moment of lift as we get out of this crisis stronger and together. I can barely believe it's September as I record this. I have not hit the mics in 2 months before my big move. And I have to say, it all feels so weird and so normal at the same time. From the challenges of 2020, I have embraced 2021 fearless. And I have continued, albeit slower, my trips around the world to meet amazing women leaders. This season, I have been following the topic, a moment of lift. I love to hear about businesses, and I also love to hear about the moment where we find ourselves as we choose to effect change. The moment of turning around and choosing to move forward and facing life, fearless and joyful. Join me for this journey to find out how, because it is time for hope and light. Joining me today, I have Joana Cunha. Joana is a sustainability advocate, climate optimist, and social entrepreneur. She's the founder of the Fair Bazaar, a marketplace that selects the best sustainable brands, and Fair News, a Portuguese sustainable fashion and lifestyle digital magazine. Joana is passionate about sharing brands, researching, giving tips to help empower everyone to make lifestyle choices that are kinder to people and the planet. Her sustainable living journey began in 2015 when she realized how our choices matter. What we eat, where we shop, what we wear, how we live. These choices have the power to shape the kind of world we live in. Before starting her own business, Joana worked at Estée Lauder, Rocket Internet, and Faber Ventures. So let's dive into it. Joana, welcome to the Make Space for Growth podcast.
Thank you.
Before we talk business, may I ask you, what was your favorite thing to do as a child, and what did you want to be when you grew up?
So I always knew that one day I wanted to have my own business. I have many entrepreneurs from my grandmother who had a carpet factory to my father and uncle who brought a franchise from the US to Portugal. But when people asked me what my dream was, I actually remember saying that one day I would like to have a school. So I was always passionate about education and children. So this is what I remember saying when I was a child.
So you didn't do the school, but you are doing a fair amount of education, and we're gonna go there.
And as you will see later, I will talk about the pillar of education, which is one of our 3 main pillars, and it's really important for us.
Absolutely. So let's just start by going a bit back in time, because you have a pretty varied background, and I think it's always interesting to bring that mix into the podcast. You started as an entrepreneur, then you spent some time on the corporate world in marketing, and then back to the startup world in multiple roles. And before you started Fair Bazaar, if I'm not mistaken, you had a stint in agriculture. So can you maybe tell us a little bit about, all this path and then how it kind of leads to Fair Bazaar?
So it all started in the summer of 2008. I went to Mozambique to volunteer in a school at Nacaroa, which is a very little and poor town. Maybe you know, because I know you also have some relations with Mozambique. And when I came back to Lisbon, we decided that we wanted to create a project to give back to this community. So we produced products made out of capulanas and sold on Facebook. At that time, Facebook was the only platform to sell this handmade products. So we sold it, and it was a success for us at that time. We were really teenagers, and part of the sales were going to support the mission where we had volunteered. So this is my starting point as a social impact entrepreneur. Although I knew that one day I would have my own business, I decided to enter the corporate world once I finished my degree, because for my journey I wanted to learn how companies work. And one of my passions is fashion and beauty. So my first job was at Estée Lauder as a marketing manager. And then I went to Singapore to work for the biggest fashion marketplace in Southeast Asia called Zalora. And I really liked the startup environment because, as you know, I had the opportunity to implement new ideas, and I'm a very creative person. But after a few years working in the corporate world and the startup world, I felt that I was some kind out of balance. And consciously, I felt that there was something missing in my life purpose equation. So I didn't feel happy and fulfilled and with what I was doing. So I decided to quit my job. At that time, I was working at a tech startup, and I decided to invest full time in my personal development. I really felt that I needed time and space to realize what to do next and to find my purpose. So during this time, I thrived to get as much information as I could. I read a lot, and I also watched different documentaries. And there was one day that I remember this day perfectly. It was really determinant in what happened next in my life. It was the True Cost movie, maybe you know. It talks about the impact of fashion on people and in the planet. And after watching it, because fashion is really also one of my passions, I felt I was not the same person anymore, because it completely opened my eyes to the true cost of fast fashion and our patterns of overconsumption. And I started looking for slow fashion brands. Immediately, I stopped fast fashion, but it wasn't very easy at that time. It was in 2016 when I watched the documentary, because I struggled a lot to understand if the brands that I was searching for, if they were really sustainable. And during this journey, I discovered incredible companies with amazing stories. So inspired by hearing the stories of these brands that I found, that Fair Bazaar started to take a form in my mind and also in my heart, because I really felt the purpose.
That's it's very interesting, because it kind of, as everything in life, it all flows. But your first experience was actually very close to how we met, which was precisely because at the charity we were trying to sell Capulana-made products, to revert back to the sustainable activities we had. So it was actually many years ago when we first spoke. It was actually a project you had done yourself, and so you told us kind of almost the personal side of the story in terms of how you realized fast fashion and how you steered away from it, and especially on the professional side, because you had many roles. Then how is it that you then got to say, all right, I'm going to create this company and this is what I'm going to do? What led you there?
Mm-hmm. So I think the experience I had working in the two startups helped me a lot, because there I understood how exactly an idea starts and transforms into a real company. I had the privilege to see these two totally different startups grow from scratch. And this was critical for me to gain the confidence to start my own company. And also, I felt a strong sense of purpose, as I was saying, when I started Fair Bazaar, because you really need a strong sense of purpose to give you the drive and the courage to start something that you really, really believe. So I think those two, the experience and the purpose, were the two things that led me to create Fair Bazaar.
So I think you started answering my next question, which is good, because then it makes even more sense. Because I was going to ask you what attributes from your different experiences in the past, and you just talked about resilience. Mm-hmm. You have others that kind of you brought and made you the CEO that you are today.
I think the three most important key attributes that make me the CEO I am today are optimism, passion, and inspirational. Because first, the optimism, I think you need really to be an optimistic person about your business, because if you don't believe in it, no one else will. And you also need to be truly passionate about the work you do, believe in the company's mission statement and also the values, and want also the employees and customers to do the same. So passion is also fundamental. And lastly, inspirational, because if you can inspire your team, you will notice that they will work harder and from their hearts also, and more committed to their job. So those three attributes, I think, are really important: optimism, passion, and inspirational.
Yeah, the latter one is sometimes underestimated as something a little bit softy, but no doubt people follow leaders, they don't follow bosses. So it's certainly an important one. I always like to go straight to the business and how it got impacted, but I think given the business you have, I think it's worth spending a little bit of time on your mission. And so I think maybe if you can tell us a little bit about Fair Bazaar, and I know you're passionate, but why you're so passionate, because of what are you trying to do?
Mm-hmm. So let me start with the mission. Our mission is to empower, inspire, and educate consumers to live a more conscious life. So we empower through our marketplace, where we give the opportunity to consumers to vote with their wallets and to buy products that have really an impact in the world. Secondly, we inspire through the talks, the master classes that we give, and third, the education, because we also educate through the Fair News, which is the digital magazine that we launched during the pandemic, and we really also are passionate about education and educating people to change their mindsets and to live a more conscious life. And I'm passionate about it because each time we sell a product at Fair Bazaar, we are actually contributing for the growth of amazing brands and positively impacting the world for the better. And I'm also very passionate when I give talks and master classes, because I really feel that somehow I'm planting seeds and hopefully transforming mindsets. And this also fulfills me.
That's going one at a time, and you did end up where you wanted in education. So
exactly,
the childhood dream was spot on, which you don't always find it here. I think I found all sorts of childhood dreams in the podcast, and that was not where people ended up. So you've been the CEO of the company for 5 years, and I remember we spoke at different stages in the past, and one of them, you were fundraising, others you're looking at how you grow a team. Can you tell us maybe about the different stages that it meant to create this business from scratch to where you are today, and how you had to evolve as well?
Yeah, I think Fair Bazaar went through 3 different phases, I would say. The first phase, I call it pre-launch phase, started in 2017 when I had the idea of Fair Bazaar after watching the documentary and after talking with some brands. And it started with my trip to Berlin and Copenhagen to get to know the brands and the world of sustainable fashion better, because I was really in the beginning of my journey in the sustainable fashion movement. And at this stage, it was important to know the market, the players, the references in sustainable fashion at an international level, and the clients also very well. The second phase was the official launch with Fair Bazaar's presence at Greenfest, because it's the main sustainability event in Portugal. So it was really an opportunity for us to appear in the first event such as Greenfest. And this opening was very important also for us to get insights from the customers. And after that, in the second phase, we launched also the first physical store in Príncipe Real, and the launch of the online platform. So this was a phase that started with the launch at Greenfest, and after a few months, I would say 3 months, we opened the physical store, and then after 6 months, we launched the online platform. And the third phase started in 2020 when the pandemic. It was a completely different phase. I had to close the two physical stores that I had, one in Príncipe Real and the other at Amoreiras. And I had to adapt the business totally to the new reality. Because with the pandemic, new opportunities emerged for Fair Bazaar, which nowadays are really essential for the business. And I'm talking about the B2B trainings for large companies, the master classes, the talks and the workshops. And it was also during the pandemic that I launched Fair News, the sustainability digital magazine with 6 bi-weekly articles that aim to inspire and educate consumers for a more conscious lifestyle. And this holistic view was also very important because it was always there, but we had the opportunity to develop it even more during the pandemic, which is something that I'm really proud of because we are providing a consolidated view of sustainability and at the same time contributing to a more conscious lifestyle.
You're jumping ahead to the part where you tell us all the good side of the pandemic, which is always very hard to find given it was a pandemic, and you've already started giving us the bits. But before we go there, I have one more question, which is, can you just maybe explain to people what your business model is? Mm-hmm. What is it that you actually do? You've explained your mission and your pillars, but what is the business model? What, in the end, it's a business and it has to make money to continue to survive. What do you do?
So at Fair Bazaar, we started with the online marketplace and the 2 physical shops. And so here we as a marketplace, we earn a commission from the products that we sell. And after the pandemic, the business model suffered a lot. We had to adjust it and included 2 more business areas. The educate and the inspire pillar, which, as I previously mentioned, allows us not only to provide a holistic view of sustainability, but also to diversify our business model, which is very important to diversify. And we currently have the B2B and the B2C masterclasses where we teach, I can give some examples such as Sustainable Fashion 101 and Sustainability at Work, and also the Fair News, the digital magazine, also emerged through the pandemic and is also a pillar that for now we don't have any revenue stream from there, but we envision to have soon.
So you mentioned that you face limitations, and when you tell me that you have 2 stores, I can start imagining there. So we know that that's the easy part to conceive. You have 2 stores are closed. Mm-hmm. So what other limitations did you face during the pandemic that forced you to adjust? What shook the business in day one?
So as I said earlier, the pandemic contributed to what Fair Bazaar is today. We were forced to close our 2 physical shops in Lisbon and focus on our educational and inspirational pillar. And as you can imagine, it was a very, very hard time for me because I had to cut all the costs in order to survive, meaning firing people, quitting our office, and so on. But in the end, I believe everything happens for a reason, and we had time to develop the 2 pillars that are essential in our strategy today and allowed us to have a stronger business model. So this is...
Went straight to the positives, which is fine because this is about a moment of lift. So I'm all for the positive. Mm-hmm. So you already told us a little bit of change that you did because we were in a pandemic, but ended up being for the best. It gave you time for the education. It gave you time to develop the magazine. What other changes, and maybe you could talk a little bit about how it changed from being more a B2C marketplace to the B2B, or what other ways did the business evolve as you made use of the fact that you had no choice but to cut costs and to reinvent yourself as a business model?
Mm-hmm. So Fair Bazaar's strategy changed a bit because we had to adapt to this total new reality. And after doing a little brainstorm with the team, I realized that there were 2 essential pillars that we needed to focus on: the educational and the inspirational pillar that were somehow missing in terms of focus. And that's how we created the Fair News, to educate, and also the Fair Experiences. That is the pillar that we wanted to give also the voice. And so everything started with a pandemic, and now Fair Bazaar is much more than a marketplace, and that's because of the pandemic.
And you said you also started a bit of a B2B side of the business that you didn't have before. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, the B2B it started when EDP called me to give 8 master classes for their customers, because EDP is investing a lot in sustainability now, and they are talking to some startups in Portugal that are already a reference. And I was very proud to when I received this call, because it was really in the middle of the pandemic, and I was somehow finding a way through it, and it was like, aha, so this is the day where I find really what to do, and EDP made me give really the perspective of how can we transform this business in terms of education and inspiration, and really plant the seeds to people that want to change their lives and change their mindsets. We nowadays we give master classes to Accenture. We also gave to JLL, so totally different industries, but all of them have the same common thing, which is sustainability focus, and they want to partnership with startups like Fair Bazaar, because we have already some know-how and already many stories to share.
So you had the phase 1, 2, and 3. So what lies ahead for Fair Bazaar? What are the opportunities that you see now with this new strategy and with these stronger pillars?
I see a lot of opportunities for Fair Bazaar, because more and more companies across different industries are now looking at sustainability, as you know, and wanting to invest in education for their teams, but also their customers. And Fair Bazaar is already a reference because we have the B certification. It helps us a lot to create great partnerships with corporates. So somehow the B certification gives us, differentiates us from other companies that are also trying to do the same. And so I'm a very optimistic person, and I think this is a very good phase for Fair Bazaar.
So you've been an entrepreneur for a long time now. What were, looking back, the most difficult decisions that you had to do in this entrepreneurial journey?
The hardest decisions for me were really during the pandemic. I think the pandemic was really the point where I had the biggest challenges. I had 2 difficult decisions to make. One, to close or not the stores, because I really didn't know how many months the pandemic would be. And at the beginning, no one knew how it would evolve. And I was at that time I decided to close, because I really didn't have resources to survive. So I had to close the 2 stores. And also the second decision was to fire or not people, but you have really to cut all the costs in order to survive. So the truth is that I didn't have any other option. So those were the 2 difficult questions, the 2 difficult decisions I had to make.
So let's move then to the more personal level. The Joana, you've mentioned Lisbon already, so you gave people a hint. So can you tell a little bit more to those listening to us, which is pretty global at the moment? Where were you when lockdown hit, and what were the restrictions and kind of the lockdown situation where you were?
I was in Lisbon when COVID-19 appeared, and we had to lock down in March 2019. My daily life changed radically. As I have a small son, 3 years now, and live in an apartment in Lisbon, I decided to do quarantine at my mother's house together with my family. So my family was my sister, my grandmother. So it was like we were living in a community with 10 people. that belong to the same family. The reason why I decided to move to my mother's house is because it was outside the city, and for my son it was very good because he had plenty of space to play in the nature, and it's important for him to not be closed in an apartment. Second, my mom helped me taking care of my son so that I could work. That was also very clever for me. And third, because at that time I was going through difficult times at Fair Bazaar, and having my family also around me was really essential.
Yeah, it was. There was a true rush to the countryside at that time, but it was also interesting because there have been a fair amount of guests where this happened, where people moved in with their families, and there was much more a bit of a return to the older times where multi-generational living was the norm. So the next question about how day-to-day changed, it's I can tell already so many things that changed, but I'm curious, did you start any new things? Were there like new habits you created, or some people started baking, painting by numbers, puzzles? I have my kind of summer list here, and we did do one last year as well. We did our lockdown list or our post-lockdown list. Were there new things that happened for you as a family of 10?
So actually, I didn't have time, to be honest, to start baking or some kind of new hobby. So I didn't start any new hobby during the pandemic, but I kept practicing 3 things that for me are really important to stay balanced, which is meditation, yoga, and running every week. And these 3 activities were really key in order to stay positive and have my self-care time just for me. So it was not something that I started new. It was just those 3 things together that I already practiced, but really with discipline every week were really important for me.
And what did you miss the most from the day-to-day life?
I think the thing I missed most was the physical contact with the team, because I really like to be physically present. I love the spirit that we lived in the co-work space where we worked before. It had an incredible atmosphere there. And this was definitely the thing that I missed most.
We know, the pandemic has definitely brought us great struggles, and you've given us a handful of them already in the business. But in this season, I am going after this moment of lift, and this way that we say, finally, we're going to look forward. Mm-hmm. We're going to lift ourselves up. And sometimes that requires a little bit of reflection and looking back. And what was your high point and your low point in this pandemic journey? If you don't mind sharing, it can be personal, professional, whatever you're comfortable with.
The low point was when I decided to close the 2 shops. And the high point was when ADP contacted me to create 8 master classes around sustainable living, which confirmed that there was really a need for what we were creating.
And I think you got us started on this. I think you've been listening to my podcasts and you knew what I was going at. So what do you think has helped you keep a positive attitude? And I know you spoke about meditation and yoga and physical exercise, but can you share, any practical tips on how you managed yourself through this pandemic?
Yes, I am, as I said, I'm already a very optimistic person. I always looking at the bright side. So this characteristic helped me a lot in finding light at the end of the tunnel and keep my positive view on the business and mission. But during the pandemic, I had also to find ways to stay balanced and take care of me. There were 2 essential things that I did every week. So the running and practicing yoga and meditation helped me. Yeah, I actually replied this earlier because these were really the 3 things that made me stay balanced.
All right. So before we finish, I want to grab a little bit more wisdom, which we've gotten a lot today. Knowing what you know today and all this path, would you give yourself different advice if you would go back kind of 18 months in time?
Yes, if I could go back in time a year ago, I would perhaps have opted to focus more on the online channel, because at that time I was very focused on the physical stores. We are a very small team, and the 2 physical stores were really needing my help there. So maybe I could have maintained the team if I started early earlier, focusing on the online marketplace. Nowadays, as you can see with the pandemic, it is very, very important to have a really strong presence online. This is the one thing I would have changed.
Finally, what was your biggest lesson from this pandemic?
The biggest lesson I take from the pandemic is that you need to diversify your revenue streams and not depend on just one, because although the focus is really important, you need to have another plan B in case things don't go well as planned. And as I usually say, the business plan is a live organism that evolves with time, and so we have to adapt to the circumstances in order to survive. So this is my biggest lesson.
And so I'm going to shoot 2 surprise questions, but I know you're okay because you've already recommended a video, a film, so I think you can recommend as a book for 2021.
Yeah, I can recommend a book that was for me life-changing, which is Search Inside Yourself. When I started meditating, it was really because of this book, and it was life-changing for me.
Yes, it needs to go on my list. I have heard about it. And to close us off, what would be one word for 2021?
One word for 2021, I would say new opportunities. Are 2 words. Opportunities.
That's okay. Okay, we can go with 2. Joana, thank you so much for being at the Make Space for Growth podcast. It was great hearing from you, and I appreciate all that you shared with us today.
Thank you, Sarah, so much. It was a privilege.
I had the best time talking to Joana today. I've come across Joana many years ago as part of a partnership my charity A Little Gesture set up on the women empowerment space. Since then, we've kept in touch, and I've watched the business grow and flourish through high times and not so high times. As many other entrepreneurs, Joana faced the difficulty of closing shops and firing people. As an optimist, she did not let that deter her. In fact, she ended up developing 2 additional pillars: inspiration and education, that today support a stronger business. Yet again, Joana reminds us of the importance of adapting and moving with what is happening around us. And she closes us with a favorite word that makes space for growth: opportunity. If you enjoyed our conversation today, send me a note or share your favorite part on social media. I'm always grateful for feedback and the connection on how I'm reaching you. A final note to thank Alice Stansfield, my producer. And until we meet again, I get to do this.